Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you very much to Luz Alvarela for being here. Thank you for coming down from Boston. And more importantly, thank you for the work that you do every day for the financial well-being and security of families in Massachusetts. Makes a big difference.
It's such a pleasure to have you here in this body representing us.
Thank you. So thank you for doing this, Senator Stabenow, for putting this together. Here I am. I'm in cleanup position. So with us in the seventh game of the World Series, my job is to pull some of this together. You know, President Trump and the Republicans have made some pretty amazing claims about what their tax plan would do. And I'm just going to quote some of these. They've said it will create millions of new jobs, more money for middle-class Americans, paid for with economic growth. These are all direct quotes. Basically, free ice cream for everyone. No, that last one was me. But I think that's the right summary here. As we know, these are not new ideas. We've seen these ideas before, and one reason we wanted to be here today is to talk about the experience in Kansas, because we know that Kansas tried it. That in 2012, Kansas Republicans, led by Republican Governor Sam Brownback, enacted a massive partisan tax cut that cut taxes for the richest Kansans and created a huge loophole for people who could afford to hire lawyers and shield them from paying a fair share of their taxes. And exactly what the Republicans in Washington are trying to do now for the whole country. So, Mr. Ward, you were serving in the Kansas House of Representatives when the tax plan was pushed through. And before we talk about what the plan did, I want to start. Can you tell us what Governor Brownback and other Republicans in your state promised that the tax plan was going to do?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, the governor and all of the only thing I would say, there was a good group of Republicans that were moderates who joined with moderate Democrats and opposed. We just didn't have the numbers. And that's one advantage you have. You have more numbers than we did that year. They all said those quotes could have came out of Sam Brownback's mouth in 2012. Those quotes could have came out of Richard Carlson, who was the chair of our tax committee and carried this bill on the House floor, his mouth. Governor Brownback went one step further because he likes colorful language. He said that these tax cuts would be an adrenaline shot to the heart of the Kansas economy. And then he followed it up or doubled down by saying not only will that happen in economic growth, you'll get 25,000 new jobs in 4 years.
Okay, so 25,000 new jobs in 4 years is going to boost job growth, pay for itself, right? Am I right?
That's it.
Boost investment, increase economic growth, all the parts. You know, it sounds like a lot like what we're hearing right now from President Trump and the congressional Republicans about their plan, which actually shouldn't be a surprise because, after all, the billionaire Koch brothers were behind the Kansas tax plan. And now they're throwing around tens of millions of dollars to push this new Republican plan nationally. But one of the most important promises that Republicans made was that it was going to help working families and create jobs. So, Mr. Ward, after the Republican tax plan took effect in Kansas, how did your state's job growth compare to the United States as a whole?
We were much below the national average of job creation over the 4 years of the tax experiment.
Yeah, actually, I have here that you were 48 out of 50.
Yes.
All right, 48 out of 50 in
and Kansas don't like being 48 of anything.
Okay, all right, I got it. And how did you compare with neighboring states? I want to know if there was just a regional problem.
No, we're touched by Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, and Missouri. We tended to finish fifth, and we really don't like finishing fifth to those four states.
Fifth out of five. Okay.
Not that they're not wonderful states, but we're competitive in Kansas.
Okay. So the Kansas tax cut experiment totally failed at creating jobs, as the Republicans had promised. So let's talk now for just a second about what it did do. Mr. Ward, how did this tax plan affect schools in Kansas?
Thank you, sir. In Kansas, we spend 50 cents of every tax dollar on pre-K through 12 education. We spend another 20 cents on our higher ed program, junior colleges, community colleges, and our border regions colleges. Today, as we sit here, we're still about 1,500 teachers short from a full staffing. Teachers are not choosing Kansas to make their careers. We have too large of class sizes. We've lost programs that impact those children that are challenged. We had school districts that had to cut the number of days a week to meet their budget. Because when you pay for these kind of tax cuts, which the economists in this panel have talked about, there have to be pay-fors one way or the other. And Sam Brownback made the largest single not tax cut. Well, he did that too. But the largest cut to public schools in Kansas came under Governor Brownback in his first year of the tax plan because the deficit created was so large, he had to fill it.
And you mentioned about K-12, about schools being closed. I understand in small towns, teachers, you've got all of these teacher vacancies now, teachers that were laid off, days that were shortened for the school year. What about for higher ed? What happened to higher ed in Kansas?
That's even more disturbing because it's becoming too expensive for our kids to go. They're delaying those kinds of decisions because when the state doesn't make investments, universities turn to tuition and fees. And a good, colorful, when I went to school many, many years ago in the 70s, the state of Kansas, I only paid for about 25% of my education through tuition. Today, that's way up over 60%, 55%. And the universities are struggling to keep it affordable. The community colleges are struggling to keep it affordable. There are some incredibly creative, Cowley County is doing an incredibly creative way. There are hundreds of examples of that, but it's still becoming much too expensive.
And that's what happens when I suppose when you cut tens of millions of dollars out of your higher ed programs. So I appreciate your coming here and talking about this, Mr. Ward. You know, the Kansas tax cut experiment was great for millionaires and billionaires, but for everyone else, it was a total failure. A failure for workers, a failure for middle-class families, a failure for kids. It was such a failure that 5 years after enacting these tax cuts, Kansas Republicans passed a law to reverse it. And if the Republicans in Washington want to do to America what they did to Kansas, then we know exactly where this goes. We've now seen the movie and we know how it ends. The Republican tax plan is just a way for the rich to get richer and everyone else to fall further behind. It is that simple. Working families in this country face terrible challenges. Wages that are too low, expenses for healthcare and housing and education costs that are too high. And what are the Republicans doing about it? What is their plan? They're peddling the same snake oil that they sold in Kansas just so they can maximize payoffs to their corporate donors. You know, we need to fight this Republican tax plan because our kids' futures depend on it. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.